Hello, now we're continuing our work in financial maths, and today we're going to learn about something called compound interest. So compound interest comes into maths when we're talking about money that we would leave in a savings account, or if we have a mortgage, we'd also have compound interest. So it's how the value of money changes over time can be a way that we can think about it. Now, to do compound interest, we're going to use our log tables, so our formula tables that we're going to need in our exams. And page 30 of those tables has this formula here. F is equal to P multiplied by 1 plus I to the power of T. Now that looks very complicated and very unusual, but we are going to get very used to it very quickly. We're always going to do the same thing with it, so we're going to get very comfortable with it. So let's have a look at what all of these different letters mean. So the starting amount in Old English was called the principal. So its letter is capital P. So the starting amount in Old English was called the principal amount. So it was called capital P. And that's the capital P in our formula here. And it's equal to, in this case, €3,000. In the example that I'm going to go through with you, we're going to start off with €3,000, and the starting amount of money is called capital P. The percentage interest, so the amount of money that we're going to earn each year, how the value of our money is changing each year, is called the interest, and the percentage interest is 10%. The effect is every year we're going to increase the value of our money by 10%. So we're going to end up with 10% more money at the end of each year. The final value is capital F. And that's fairly straightforward. The final value is what we're going to end up with. So how much money we're going to have at the end of a particular amount of time. The interest earned is called euro interest because it's an amount of money in euro, and it's how much interest, how much extra money we now own. And time is going to be little t, and in our first example it's going to be 1 year. So I'm going to look in part 1 for the final value. So if I start out with a particular amount of money, I'm looking for the final value. So I'm going to put F in my formula is question mark. It's what I'm looking for. P, the principal or the amount of money I started out with was €3,000. I is the percentage interest, and it's 10%. And I know I don't like to work with percentages, so I'm going to put that in my calculator, 10 over 100. And I'm going to get that it's 0.1. So that's my interest, that little I. And T, that's an indice or a power, is going to be 1 in this question. And it's going to be 1 year. So this is what I've done. I have my formula. I've written down all the information I'm given in the question. And now I'm going to sub into my formula. So F is equal to P on 1 plus I to the power of T. So the power here, just to remind you before we start, if I had 3 to the power of 2, it would mean that I was going to multiply 3 by itself twice, and when I put that in my calculator, I would get 9. So that's what the little t up here means. It's an indice, it's a power. Just to remind you of what our little number up in the top corner means. So I'm looking for F, so I just write down F. P is 3,000, so where there's a P in my equation, in my formula, I'm going to write down 3,000. And I have a bracket, and then 1 plus I is 0.1, it's 10%. Close the bracket, and then I'm going to use my power button on my calculator, and I'm going to put in 1. And when I put that into my calculator, I get €3,300. So what does that mean? It means if I had started out with €3,000, I had an interest rate of 10%, and I left it in the bank for 1 year, I'd end up with €3,300 at the end of the first year, at the end of year 1. and I can see how I can sub into my formula. This formula is always going to be the same, and it's always on page 30 in our log table. So even though it has several parts to it, we're always going to do exactly the same thing with it. We write down all of our information, we write down our formula, and we put each bit of information where the letter goes in the formula. Now, if I wanted to know the amount of interest I had earned, which I called euro interest up above, the amount of interest I earned, well, what would that mean? I started out with 3,000 euro. I ended up with 3,300 euro. So how much extra money did I get? Well, I'd have 3,300 euro minus the amount that I started with. That would be 300 euro. I earned 300 euro in interest. So my interest earned is 300 euro. It's the extra money that I have at the end of a year. And writing it more generally, it would be the final value minus the money we started with. The final value minus the money we started with gives me my euro interest, or the interest I have earned. Now, just to show you how useful this formula is, we don't have to do it over 1 year. We can actually do this problem, but we can say that we're going to have our interest earned over 2 years. So we leave the money in the bank for 2 years instead of leaving it in the bank for only 1 year, and see how much extra money we end up with when we leave it in the bank for 2 years. So my final value is still what I'm looking for. My starting amount, my principal, is still 3,000 euro. My interest rate is still 10%. So I write that in again. And this time my time is going to be 2 years. I write down my formula from page 30 in my log tables. And now I'm going to write in all of my bits of information. I'm looking for F. P is 3,000. Open up a bracket, 1 plus my interest is 0.1. And this time my T is 2. So this is going to be power button. This is going to be power button on my calculator. And I'm going to put 2 as a power on the bracket. And when I put this into my calculator exactly as I've written it here, I will get 3,630 euro. 3,630 euro. So that's the final value. That's how much money will be in my bank account if I started out with 3,000 euro and I left it in the account for 2 years, and the bank would give me interest for that. And they're not doing it because they're being nice. They've calculated that they can give me that much interest and still make money themselves. But this is the amount of money I would end up with in my account at the end of 2 years. Well, then let's ask ourselves, how much interest have I earned over the 2 years? If I start out with 3,000 euro and I end up with 3,600 euro, how much interest have I earned? Well, I know it's going to be in my final value minus the money I started with, which is 3,630, minus the money I started with is 3,000. So my amount of interest earned then is going to be, when I put that in my calculator, I get 630 euro. So over 2 years, I earned 630 euro in interest. And so you can see, even though there are lots of parts to our formula, we used it in exactly the same way. And it's always going to be exactly the same. So even though it's a complicated looking formula, we have it in the log tables, and we're going to be able to just write it down, write down all the information we're given, and put it into the right parts of the formula, put it in our calculator, and we'll get out our answer. So that's what we need for compound interest.